very slim. It's just kind of a fact of life because the prosecutor doesn't believe it's okay to do that. We had two of those prosecutors in Florida, one in Tampa, one in Orlando. They didn't want to enforce laws that they disagreed with. I didn't just sit on my hands. I removed both of them from their posts. They're gone. We need leadership. We need to restore the rule of law in this country. You cannot have the inmates run the asylum. You cannot have a prosecutor pick and choose which laws are valid and which laws aren't. You know, if you don't disagree with the law, resign your post and run for the legislature and try to change the law. That's the way it goes. You don't just ignore the law, but that has fueled massive rise in crime in these cities. And look, a lot of these are deep blue areas, but I just don't think as Americans, we're not going to be successful if every urban area is crime infested. I mean, I was in San Francisco a couple months ago, and you hear stories about people defecating on the sidewalk and just using drugs. And sure enough, I got there within 5 minutes. I see a guy on the sidewalk just relieving. I'm like, this is crazy. When have we ever seen this? All these people in these open-air drug markets. It's like society has collapsed. Enough of this. We need to have rule of law. We need to take care of business. Every family should have the right to raise their kids in peace and security from coast to coast. And we don't have that right now. That will change when I become president. You're going to see a new sheriff in town. You're going to see a lot of different things that are going to be happening. And I think about the political class and the political system. Yes, you want to elect a good president, and if I'm the nominee, we'll win the House and Senate, and we'll have coattails. You know, in Florida, we had massive coattails. We have super majorities now, school board, everything, you name it, we did it. That's what we need nationally, and it's important, and you can do some good things. But the long-term trajectory is poor unless we have some really fundamental reform. You need term limits for members of Congress. You need a balanced budget requirement for the Constitution. I've got to balance my budget in Florida. Why should the U.S. government not have to balance its budget? It's always the path of least resistance to put it on the credit card. Then the politician doesn't have to deal with any of the consequences directly. We also need to give the president a line item veto. You know, when I have budgets on my desk in Florida, I can hack out individual pork barrel spending projects. And so I vetoed one year, I vetoed 3% of the budget doing that. In Washington, they'll put a massive bill on your desk as president. You either sign it, the whole thing, or veto the whole thing. But I think if you had that line item, you could take out so much waste. I mean, why should your tax dollars be used to be spent to promote transgenderism in Bangladesh, which it does do now? It's unacceptable. So if you have that tool, you'll be able to do it. So we're going to push for some significant reforms through Article 5 of the Constitution. It'll be the states that are going to be driving it. Florida, we've already certified things like this, really significant. I'm sure South Carolina's been involved in it as well. Washington is not going to willingly reform itself. It really is going to take we, the people, to rise up and to force this change. So we're going to do that for them. Our military, we do not have the military we need to be able to deter threats in this world. Biden has invited a lot of instability in the world. He's invited a lot of bad guys to try to take advantage of him. It's just a lack of leadership. It's a lack of strength. But our military itself does not have what it needs to deter countries like China and their designs in the Indo-Pacific. So we're going to rebuild that. Yes, we're going to fix the culture. We're going to do all that. But we'll rebuild the military. And my philosophy is peace through strength. If you're strong and people respect you, they are not going to want to mess with you. When they mess with us, it's because they perceive weakness. Biden is the epitome of weakness. And I think we're going to have another rocky year in 2024, unfortunately. But help will be on the way for that. And you will see a big difference starting in January 2025. Of all the people running for president, I'm the only one that has delivered on 100. It's a very red state. Under Haley, they weren't doing very much, and then now they've been doing a lot more. Obviously, Iowa and Florida have worked very collaboratively together to kind of challenge each other. You've seen other states that have had to go in Florida. So we're proud of my view is I can sit here and say things. I don't say things idly. If I'm telling you something, then I have a plan to put it in practice, and I'm not just going to say things to get through a campaign and then kind of forget about it. So you can take that to the bank. The other thing I've done is if you look at the people who are causing these problems in our country on the left, I'm the only one running for president that has beaten these people on issue after issue. We beat the teachers union on keeping kids in school during COVID, on universal school choice, and now most recently we did paycheck protection, no more forced union dues. And so you have unions like teacher union, like in Miami-Dade, is about to be decertified. We beat the left when it came to crime and Soros by removing those prosecutors. We beat Fauci on COVID when they were attacking me for having kids in school, keeping businesses open and doing that. We beat the Democrats on election integrity. We have universal voter ID, a ban on ballot harvesting, a ban on Zuckerbucks, transparent, efficient elections in Florida, the envy of the nation. On and on it goes. We beat the far left on banning China from buying land in the state of Florida. No farmland, no land near military bases, none of that. So you need somebody that's going to fight for you, and a lot of Republicans won't even do that, of course, but you need someone that's going to win for you. And yes, win the election, and of everyone running for president, I have by far the best electoral track record in terms of actually winning big elections. But it also means winning on these fights. It means that we need to beat the left on all these issues. Otherwise, an election is just kind of a Pyrrhic victory. If they're able to continue their march through all these institutions and keep racking up victories, you may be able to stop some of the worst abuses, but we're not really changing the trajectory. So I'll win so that we can change the trajectory of the country. And then finally, you need a leader. It's one thing to be right on policy, but a president's got to be somebody that can lead. And you got to be able to articulate a vision that people can get behind. And you got to be willing to stand for that vision, implement that vision, even when they're gunning for you. And they are going to gun for you. When you go up to Washington, the bureaucrats are going to revolt, the media, the left, everyone's going to want you to fail. Every single day it's going to be about trying to trip you up. You got to have that compass set to true north. You got to understand that the day-to-day nonsense that gets put out there by the media and all doesn't matter. What matters is, are you delivering for the people that sent you to office? And you got to have some humility about this. A president is one person, and yes, you put the vision, you have to make the decisions, and it's important, but you need a lot of people around you who share the vision, who can work in the White House, who can work in these agencies, and will bring these policies to bear in a really, really significant way. Hubris is the enemy. Ego is the enemy of a good, strong president. We don't want a King Saul type situation. We want somebody that is a servant leader, that understands ultimately the future of our country is in God's hands. Our rights come from our Creator, not from the government, and we need to do all we can to make sure that everyone's able to realize their God-given potential, and that's what I'll do. So I'm happy to take some questions. I'll just end with this. I'm motivated to run because I see our country being in jeopardy of being the first generation of Americans to turn over to our kids and grandkids in America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And if that happens, we will be the first generation in American history to do such a thing, because all throughout our history, people have stood up when freedom was threatened. They've sacrificed so that future generations would be able to have opportunities and to live in freedom. And I'm motivated because we have a first grader, kindergartner, and pre-K3 at home. So my wife and I, these education issues are personal to us. The future of the country is very personal to us because we see it through the prism of opportunities for our kids. And I know that's true for many of you, caring about your kids and grandkids and their future. But I'm also motivated by a debt of gratitude we owe to people that have come before us to sacrifice for us. I used to fly up to Washington, D.C., and there was a particular path you can take going into Reagan Airport that took you flush parallel to the National Mall. So if you looked out the left side of the plane, you saw really up-close views of the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument, all the different monuments, and then even on the hill, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building. And you felt a sense of pride as an American because that symbolizes the principles and the values that have made this country unique. And the tourists would love it. I mean, they would be gawking at it. After I did the trip a few times, I realized the best monuments to this country's ideals were not seen out the left side of that plane on the nation's mall. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, you saw a series of small, nondescript monuments orderly arranged over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me then, and I believe now, you can have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and cultivate and defend freedom when it's threatened, and sometimes put on a uniform, risk your life, and even give the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. Now, we're not called upon to make sacrifices of that nature here in this political season, but what we are called upon to do is to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. This is a fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when 56 men pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when our nation's first Republican president pledged our nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned on the beaches of Normandy when a merry band of brothers stormed the shores, defeated the Nazis, and preserved liberty throughout the world. It's a fire that burned at the foot of the Berlin Wall in 1987 when a resolute Republican president stood in front of that wall and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," eventually leading to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. This is our responsibility, to carry that torch and to preserve that sacred fire of liberty. It's not a responsibility I shy away from. It's a responsibility that I welcome. Because if not us, who? If not now, when? This is the time for us to reverse the decline of this country. This is our time to usher in a new birth of freedom all throughout the land. This is the time to engineer a revival of the American spirit. I am asking for your support on January 15th in the Iowa caucus. I can tell you this, as the candidate, I'll get the job done next November in a big way. As a leader, I'll always conduct myself in a way that you can be proud of. And as your next president, I promise you this, I will not let you down. Thank you all. God bless you. Happy to take some questions. Yes.
Two quick questions. When you get into office and win, which is positive on that, will you first get rid of all the poisonous executive orders and the tapioca pudding cups out of Biden's office?
Absolutely.
Second one is, I bought ammunition yesterday in the state of Iowa. I had to show my ID to buy my magazines and ammunition to prove I was not from the communist state of Illinois.
Why? I don't understand. So Iowa doesn't want to sell to Illinois people?
Yeah. Illinois has caused Iowa to ID people from Illinois to not sell. And so that there is a cancerous creep of anti-Second Amendment coming from Illinois into Iowa. And then if I cross the river with my self-defense, I and everybody here becomes an automatic felon and goes to prison.
So a couple things on that. One, he talked about reversing Biden's executive orders. Yes, day one, gone in the trash can. Don't worry about that. And there are also things that he hasn't done yet or that he's trying to do that we're also going to deep six. For example, Biden wants to impose this World Health Organization lockdown treaty on the country. Now, in Florida, we saw this. We've already passed legislation that I signed saying we're not going to recognize any WHO treaty. But this is basically taking our sovereignty and turning it over to the WHO when it comes to these pandemics. And all the stuff that happened during COVID, nobody's been held accountable for it. I'm going to bring accountability to all these people because they harmed a lot of people, and we can't let this happen again. But WHO treaty, on day one, we will tear that up and we will throw that in the trash can. That'll be dead. The other thing that'll be dead, which is what the Federal Reserve is trying to do, they want to do a central bank digital currency. Has anyone heard of this? Have you guys heard? So basically, they want to move to a cashless society. They don't want cryptocurrency, and they want everything to be done with this CBDC, central bank digital currency. Why would they want to do that? Are they just trying to be nice to you? Well, they're doing it because, yes, they'll be able to surveil transactions and ultimately be able to prevent transactions. And, when you point this out, people like to be say, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. No, there's people like the World Economic Forum that are bragging about this. And it's because they don't want you to buy ammunition. So if you so maybe you do too much gas in a week, they will stop the payment or stop that. So it is sometimes government does things that may appear benevolent, but are kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And you got to be trained to think about, okay, what could go wrong here? This is not a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is a wolf showing up as a wolf. This is a system that would take away your freedom and your financial privacy. So we will end the idea of central bank digital currency on day one as president. And I think that's really, really significant. And Second Amendment, look, I'm the strongest Second Amendment candidate running. Donald Trump, he had to be reeled in from violating this. Actually, they did do it with the bump stock ban. That's been found to be unconstitutional. You cannot do through the bureaucracy these rules that make people felons. I mean, first of all, whether Congress could do it and the Constitution, that's a separate question. But a bureaucracy to just say something, an accoutrement that people have all of a sudden is illegal and you're a felon for something that you legally purchased, that is a gross abuse of power. What Biden's trying to do with this pistol brace rule is a gross abuse of power. You cannot have the bureaucracy rendering millions of people to be felons just at the drop of a hat, which is what they're doing. I also disagree with Donald Trump when he says his policy is that he wants to take guns first and then go through due process later. No, due process is the whole basis for protecting your rights and your liberties. And it's not even just about the Second Amendment. Government can't come in and seize your television without due process. They can't seize your car without due process. So, of course, you don't seize people's firearms and then say you're going to do due process later. So we have a fundamental disagreement on that. And I would just say that all of our rights are very important to protect. Some are more popular to protect than others, and there's a lot of people that are gunning for your Second Amendment rights. As your president, you'll have somebody that will protect your Second Amendment rights. Yep.
This is not a question for you, but I love the way you, I love the way you put the screws to Disney. It should be a place to take your family and kids, and not, unfortunately, that's the way the schools are getting too, but I love.
Not in Florida, they're not, because we're doing something about it. But no, I mean, I think you're right. So, this issue with Disney, if you've never lived in Florida or been in part of politics in Florida, sometimes it's hard to quite appreciate just how powerful they've been in the state of Florida. I mean, they are the 800-pound gorilla. Whatever they want typically has gone in the political system until I came on the scene. But we had this situation where, yes, they're trying to inject ideology and sexualization of curriculum, even in elementary school. And so we said no in Florida. That's inappropriate. And look, I have young kids, and I mean, I can't even conceive of talking to my kids about transgenderism and some of this stuff. It's insane that they would be doing it. So we had a bill, Parents' Rights in Education, that basically said not going to happen. The left opposed us. The media opposed us. Well, we understood that. But then Disney came out, and a lot of people are like, oh, forget it. There's no way you're going to be able to do it once they come out for it. But, my job is to lead for the people that elected me. It's not to subcontract out my office to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. And I just won't be a part of that. So we dug in. We did what was right. And the kids in Florida are better off. But there's a larger issue at stake here about woke corporations generally, but then also specifically about why would a company like Disney want to get involved in this stuff? That's not in the best interest of their shareholders. It's supposed to be a family company. Why would you want to alienate your core audience of parents when you're doing it? And they've had a lot of financial problems since. They've had a lot of problems with their programming because it's all about an agenda rather than doing what I think is more marketable and what would be better. So you've seen kind of these companies be skewed in different ways. This whole ESG, have you guys heard about ESG, environment, social governance? It's basically a ruse that justifies big corporations to use their economic power to advance a social or a political agenda. Because normally, especially if you're publicly traded, you have a fiduciary obligation to the shareholders to produce value. And so you can't get off in tangents because that would violate the fiduciary duty. So they use ESG to say, no, this is part of what your obligation to consider all these environmental factors, governance factors, social factors. And they want to go after Second Amendment. They want to go after fossil fuels. They want to go after agriculture. They view agriculture as a huge problem because of greenhouse gas and all this other stuff. They don't want meat. So there's a huge agenda behind this. And in Florida, we kneecapped it. We banned ESG in our pension. We banned the use of social credit scores, and we need to kneecap ESG nationwide. Nikki Haley she's being supported by BlackRock CEO, people on Wall Street banks. That is ESG central. Those folks want to use their economic power to be able to impose policies on you as Americans, which, first of all, these are bad policies. But it's even larger than that, because if you elect people in Iowa, not that they would do this, that impose bad policies, if Mike imposes policies on you, you can vote him out. You can vote out people that you elect. When it's being done by these big corporations based in New York, where is your recourse as a citizen if they're changing policy? So this whole idea of ESG, we're going to defeat, and those types of policies are going to be dead on arrival when I become president. Don't worry about that.
What are we going to do about this migrant mess?
End it. We're going to stop it. A couple things. Yep.
No job skills, language barriers. We can't feed them. Why should we? Why should we house them?
Well, no, I think it's a great point. I mean, you literally have, so when the war broke out in Israel, Hamas-Israel war, and I'm a governor of Florida, we have a relationship with Israel. I've got Israeli Americans in large numbers. I've got other folks that go back and forth. So I knew it was going to be a big issue for our state. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean? Well, a couple days go by. Biden, State Department, Embassy weren't helping Americans flee the war zone. So they were desperate. So I did an executive order in Florida. We scrambled planes, and we rescued over 700 people and brought them back to the United States of America. I didn't charge them for it. I didn't do that. It was something that in a time of crisis, you got to step up and lead. Now, what Biden was doing after that is they were dumping people in Greece, and then people had to get home from Greece on their own. But they were sending a bill to the Americans who they dumped in Greece. And I'm thinking to myself, if you come across the border illegally, they'll put you on a plane. They'll fly you all across this country, no charge. They will put you in hotels, no charge to the illegal, and you're paying the bill. Yet an American citizen fleeing a war situation gets a bill sent to them. Talk about putting the American people last. What a joke this is. But yeah, you're right. I mean, part of it is the sheer number of people. We cannot have mass migration in this country, whether it was legal or illegal. It's too many people. You can't have health. It poses burdens on hospitals, on education, on criminal justice. Millions and millions of people pouring in. It doesn't work. And so, yes, we're going to stop that 100%. But we're also going to look at what's happened in Europe and all these other places where they've imported people who don't want to assimilate into their society. You look at what's happening on these college campuses. We have kids on foreign student visas that are protesting in favor of Hamas. I'm sorry, you don't have a right to study here as a foreigner. It's a privilege. And if you're going to use that privilege to make common cause with Hamas as president, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. I'm not going to deal with this. We don't need to. Life's too short. People that want to come to this country, nobody has a right, like they were talking about bringing in refugees from the Gaza Strip. I said no. Why would we want to import the problems from the Gaza Strip into the United States? Is that good for you as an American? Is it good for? Of course it's not. That's part of an agenda. So we're not going to do this. People that want, if anyone comes to this country, they have to accept the founding ideals and principles of our country, and they have to be willing to assimilate into this country. And if you're not willing to do that, then fine. We're just not going to deal with it. Yep.
Why did we leave our translators in Afghanistan and Iraq who fought beside our troops, defended our troops? We promised them they could come here, and we left them.
Well, because I think Biden just broke faith. I mean, I think that when he leaves all that equipment in Afghanistan, when we have 13 people killed in the melee that ensued, he didn't leave with honor. He left with dishonor, and it's been a big stain on this country, particularly with all the sacrifices that have been made. So it's just a lack of leadership, and it's somebody that just doesn't have his head on straight when it comes to these issues. And it's been a bitter pill to swallow. I served in Iraq. I did not serve in Afghanistan, but I can tell you how that Afghanistan debacle unfolded. That's been lasting wounds for a lot of our post 9/11 veterans, and Biden is solely responsible for what happened there. Yes.
As a survivor of gun violence myself, what will you do about gun violence?
One, we're going to hold people accountable, and I think what happens is you have these people that will commit crimes, and they give a slap on the wrist, and then it escalates, and eventually they end up committing a homicide or they commit something. You've got to hold people accountable. If somebody is 17 years and 11 months old and they commit a double murder, they need to be tried as an adult. They don't need to go to juvenile for 3 years and then get put back on the street. So we're going to hold people accountable. You have to enforce laws. If you're committing criminal act, and as a big Second Amendment guy, I think it's important because I think it helps enforce the law. I think it helps deter crime. If somebody knows that they could be in an area where people are concealed carrying, they're going to be much less willing to want to do anything bad because they know they can face resistance. So I think it contributes. But at the same time, if someone's using a firearm to commit crimes, we're going to hold them accountable. We're not going to give them a slap on the wrist. We're also going to do, I can tell you in Florida, we've done a lot with school security, where we have we've put a lot of money into it. The way the schools are laid out, they're not soft targets. We have training for people if they want to be guardians, where they could, carry a firearm if they want to. Just the fact that you have that program deters people because they don't know who would be who. So there's been a lot we've done. We've put a lot of focus on the schools, and as just a parent of young people, young kids, school security is something that's very important to me. Federal government has a limited role in that. I think that's got to be more local and state, but there may be things that we can do to help out in that regard. Yes. Yeah, so Florida, we have universal school choice. I grew up in Dunedin, Florida, on the west coast of Florida. Has anyone ever heard of Dunedin? Has anyone ever been? You've heard of it? Okay. Toronto Blue Jays spring training, so the baseball fans may have heard of it. But and I went to Dunedin High School, and that was kind of it. And yes, my family, if they could have paid to go to private, they would have had that, but they would have gotten no scholarship from the state. So that was kind of that. Now, same kid growing up, you will have an ability to have a scholarship that you can take to private school. You can have an ability to go to a charter school, which are public schools but are not controlled by the school district or influenced by the teacher union. And then within your school district, you likely have multiple choices for different schools outside of your own neighborhood that are part of the public school district. So parents have an array of options now in the state of Florida. And what has that done? Our student performance is better today by far than it was 20 years ago. We were third and fourth, respectively, in fourth grade reading, fourth grade math, number 3 in K-12 achievement, and number 1 overall for education by U.S. News and World Report. So the whole debate about school choice, it's going to take away from public school, this or that, that debate is over. And then, by the way, as governor, I've done billions of dollars in increases for teachers. We've done a lot for public education, both charter and districts, and we're proud of doing that because it's all about getting the kids where they need to go and having the parents have the guiding hand in that. Nationally, you're never going to be able to get Chicago to offer choices to the parents because the teacher union controls that. And it's like a hammerlock. Los Angeles, hammerlock. Philadelphia, it's like a hammerlock. So how do you deal with it? Well, we can just sit here and say, someday you'll elect people in those from the federal level to do a program through corporate tax credits, which is similar to what we started in Florida, where a corporation can just write off a certain percentage of their tax liability. It goes to a scholarship, an entity that runs the scholarships, and then parents can apply all across the country. We did 100,000 kids, both administrative costs and scholarship, for $1 billion in Florida. 25 to 50 billion would revolutionize. You do millions of kids potentially, so you can be in a place like, and I mean, it would apply to anywhere. It apply here in the Quad Cities. It apply to people in Nevada and Florida. It doesn't matter. But you talk about the areas where there's and liberate their families and these kids from systems that are failing them. And what happens is when people see that there are those scholarships available, it creates entrepreneurship and education. People will start schools knowing that there's a stream of revenue that they can tap into with these scholarships. So in Florida, we've got a lot of stuff. I mean, we have charter schools that are chartered by Hillsdale Education. You know, we've Christian schools, the Jewish day schools, everything in between. And then parents can make decisions, and these schools have to compete for students. So we'll do that nationally. It'll be a relatively minor expense, a huge step in this country, the opportunity to get a good education. Yes? And you think that's wrong? Yeah, look, I mean, here's the thing. Like, why is this something that people are obsessed with jamming into the schools? That's what I don't understand. Are we doing so good on reading and math and science in this country that we're going to tell third graders that they can change their gender? Is that really something that is in our best interest as a society? Of course it's not. So part of it is it's definitely an agenda where they're trying to tell kids that this is all, their gender is just fluid. And look, we've had human beings for thousands and thousands of years. You know, you're born one or the other. Like, that's just the reality. And to teach kids something different is just wrong. It's not true. But it's also the opportunity cost. If you're focusing on that, what are you not focusing on? Well, by definition, you're not teaching them about the Constitution. You're not teaching them about math. You're avoiding something to be able to indulge in that. So in Florida, we said no to it, and that's just the reality. And they have pornographic materials they're trying to shove into schools now. Why are they trying to do that? When parents, in Florida, parents have a right to inspect the curriculum. So when they figure out some of these things that are clearly not age or developmentally appropriate, they will go and they will confront the school board with it, and nobody defends it. In fact, a lot of times the parents aren't even allowed to recite what's in these materials because they're too graphic to air in a public forum. We actually have law now in Florida that says if the school board meeting, if they will not let you recite the book, then by definition it's not age appropriate to be in school for that. So you have this stuff, and it's part of an agenda, which I just don't understand how that's good for our kids. I don't understand how it's good for the country. So we've led in Florida on that. Part of it is there's things you do at the state level, which is important, but then some of these school boards and the unions can fight you. So you got to you're always having to do these battles. I mean, for example, in Florida, when we did our Parents' Bill of Rights, I signed it, and then this was when COVID was first going on, and I signed it, and then I said, you know what? Pursuant to the Parents' Bill of Rights, school districts cannot force these kids to wear masks. That's up to the parent. And some of the school districts defied me. We did litigation, and we eventually won that. But that's kind of the nature of that's one of the reasons why I got involved in a lot of school board races. We elected 29 conservative school board members throughout Florida in 2022 because you can have good policies at the state level, but you need folks locally to also be helping. So my sense would be Iowa at the state level probably has the policy right, but some of these school districts or unions are pushing their agenda in defiance of the wishes of the state. Yes.
What would you do differently in Israel and the Ukraine than what we see today?
Good Lord. I mean, talk about feckless leadership. I think neither likely would have happened if we had strong leadership in the White House. Partially the Afghanistan withdrawal, I think, greenlit a lot of people to do a lot of bad things. Obviously, Hamas would want to attack Israel no matter what, so it's not like that's only because of Biden. But I think what Biden did was he came in and he loosened the screws on the Iranians. So they got so much more revenue going into Iran, and when Iran gets that, they're going to export jihad around the world. So they're going to fund Hamas, they're going to fund Hezbollah, and I don't think that the attack would have been able to be orchestrated without the aid and comfort of the Iranians and the regime there. And so in that sense, I think Biden has really put us in a difficult situation. The thing about the Israel situation, I'm a strong supporter of Israel. I have a great relationship with a lot of people over there. My state is generally viewed as the most pro-Israel state in America under my leadership, and I'm proud of that. And we need to support them, but they really aren't asking us for much. What they're asking for is to just be in public and private, be very resolute that they have a right to defend themselves. And instead of trying to undercut them and kneecap them every step of the way, let them do what they need to do so that this doesn't happen again. And what they're facing is they're facing a terrorist group that wants a second Holocaust. This is not just like some, random skirmish that happened. Hamas would kill every Israeli if they could. They would end the state of Israel. That's their goals, to end the state of Israel. So we need to stand strong here. And also, when I see this stuff on college campuses, you'll see this, like they're protesting in favor of Hamas. I think some of these people, are really probably big problems, but I think a lot of them are just ignorant. I don't even think they know what they're protesting. And one of the signs of that is when they say that Israel is somehow a colonial power, like that just shows you, first of all, these lands like Judea and Samaria, that goes back thousands of years, the Jewish connection to that. Look at the Bible. That is where this all happened. They're the ones, the Jews got displaced from that land. I mean, they're not just interlopers, so they've had a connection to that land for thousands and thousands of years. But then you look more recently, 1948, the UN had a partition plan, a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accepted it and did Israel. The Arabs rejected an Arab state. And so they attacked Israel to try to destroy the Jewish state in its infancy, and they lost that war. Then they were preparing to invade in 1967, and Israel preempted that. Then they invaded on Yom Kippur in 1973. Israel defeated that. Then they've done these intifadas for decades now. So they had an opportunity to have an Arab state. They rejected that, and then they've lost these conflicts. So Israel, in terms of this, not occupied, and Israel. So to try to act like Israel some type of colonial power is just not true. I think it skews a lot of the discourse. And how is it that you have like the United Nations, a corrupt, useless organization, which, by the way, we will defund when I'm president because I don't need them. But how is it that you have the United Nations, most of their efforts are used to attack Israel? And this is even before this conflict. Resolution against Israel, resolution against Israel. They have Iran on the Human Rights Council. I mean, it's such a farce. But you have all this opposition against one country, the world's only Jewish state. So that shows you the anti-Semitism that's out there. I'm a big supporter of Israel. You don't have to be. You can criticize Israel's policies, but when you're turning a blind eye to all this other stuff in the world and the only focus you have is there, you got to wonder what's motivating some of that. So I think there'll be a new sheriff in town when I'm president. I think you'll see strong leadership. But ultimately, all these issues are important. I think the one issue that is the biggest challenge for us is the deterrence of China, because I think they're the only country that really represents a peer competitor to us. Their economy is almost as big as ours. Their military is gaining on ours. During the Soviet, the Cold War, the Soviet Union, their economy was a fraction of the size of ours. And their military, they had a pretty big military, obviously nuclear weapons, but from an economic perspective, they would not have been able to sustain a conventional conflict as long as we could have, given our wealth. China wants to pass us economically and militarily, and if they do that, And if they become the dominant power in the world, they are going to use that perch to export their authoritarian ideology. And you will feel that as an American, and it's not going to work out well for this country. So we still have time to prevent that from happening, but time is running out. That'll be a day one priority for us. We're going to have to rebuild deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. We're going to have to reshore some of these key industries back into the United States so that we're not dependent on the CCP. And we got to get after their influence here in the United States. And so we're going to get strong on that. We're going to get tough.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, yes, sir.
So this is more, not a question, it's more of a statement. I want to thank you for the fact that you've spent the do instead of attacking the other.
So we are going to do a debate in Iowa on January 10th, and I think President Trump's not willing to debate, so it'll just be Nikki Haley and me. So it'll be a 2-hour debate with just 2 candidates. So I think that's better because, when we started, we had 8 people, and it's like, that's not a debate, right? Those are like, press conferences side by side in the crosstalk. So when you have 2, you can kind of, have the whatever exchanges you need to do that. So I think that'll be good. I think that Trump, his refusal to debate, to me, that's a slap in the face to the people of Iowa. The fact that he's not willing to ask you for your vote, the fact that he's not willing to defend his record, the fact that he's not willing to answer questions. I mean, he was going to do an event in Northwest Iowa, and the university said if you do it, you have to answer questions from students, and he wouldn't. He's not willing to do that. Not willing to answer that. Well, that's a whole different story because, that we got to move on as a country, and so, I've addressed that, but that's a different thing. But why would he not be willing to come and get on the stage and articulate his plan for the future? And I think that, one, I don't think he's the same candidate that he was in 2015, 2016. He's lost the zip on his fastball. He's promising a lot of the same things in 23 and 24 that he promised in 16 and didn't do. And so, you're going to have to explain why didn't you build the wall? Why didn't you fire Dr. Fauci? Why didn't you do some of this stuff? And he's not willing to do that. So look, I think that as from Iowa's perspective, I think that, if someone's not willing to come and earn your support, that should make a difference to you. I think you look to see who's willing to show up, who's willing to answer questions. It's interesting. I mean, I can, everything that I've done in terms of what I say I do, I can say I get any issue we're talking about. I can say, I addressed that in Florida and show you the track record. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We're the number 1 state for in-migration, number 1 state for economy, lowest per capita debt in the country, one of the lowest per capita taxes in the country, number 1 in education, number 1 in education freedom, 50-year low in the crime rate. That's just the reality, and it's just because of leadership. So I think everyone should get on the stage. I think they have an obligation to debate. I think they have an obligation to show up in venues like this and answer questions from people. If you're not willing to do that, then I don't think that you're the guy that Iowans should support to be the nominee. Because if I'll just say, I think Iowa has a great role to play here because, the media wants you to think your vote doesn't matter. They want to think that there's not a contest here. They wouldn't be saying that unless that they have some type of an agenda at play. And they look at a guy like me and they know that not only would we beat the Democrats, and it may be Biden, it may be Harris, it may be Newsom. I've already debated him. I'll handle that again. It's fine. But even more than that, they know I'm the guy who will actually follow through on all this. And I think that they see Trump as being a guy in 2024. It'll be all about these side issues. It'll all be about a referendum on him and everything. And the fact is, he's the best turnout operation for Democrats they've ever had. He will turn out so many Democrats just to vote against him. And I think that I feel a lot of people in the media want to see that happen. So, we have a choice to be how we go forward. And with me, you'll get a candidate that'll get the job done and then deliver for you as president. And that's all that really matters. The rest is all just window dressing. So I look forward to January 15th. If you've already committed to caucus for us, thank you. If you haven't, hopefully you'll sign up with us today. And for those supporting. Bring in some more people, bring a friend, bring a neighbor, bring a coworker. You guys, when you're talking about, 150, 200,000 people that are going to have a really significant impact on the future of the country. So I think people should want to be a part of that. So I'm asking for your support. Thank you. God bless you